Is the sound good for you guys? Okay, great. Well, again, thank y'all so much for coming. Welcome to the Future is Us Group Residency. This is just an inquiry meeting and all of that. Before I fully get into the project and share with y'all what the project is, I just wanted to shout out the Future is Us Collective is having our 5th anniversary on September 23rd. And so we're celebrating. And we're having a show at the Thinker Maker Society in Old City. It should be really cute. I might be on the ones and twos a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, feel free to save the date and check us out on the 23rd and also on the 2nd for our closing reception. But yeah. So to start, I guess I wanted to give like some context or some like background inspiration of like where this project or how it came about. I think many of us, especially I was feeling this in particular, may feel deeply disconnected from our environment or feel deeply disconnected from our community, or maybe even feel deeply disconnected from like our own bodies and our own selves. And I think this like occurrence of like disconnection doesn't happen by simple coincidence, but instead is a component of surviving in the harmful, violently racist, violently othering capitalist society and environment and culture. This disconnect, this like hyper-individualism and this way of living actually encourages capitalism to thrive while it encourages us to suffer. And I was, I guess, just wondering to myself and thinking, what would it look like if we were to establish modes of community interdependence, or in other words, establish mutual responsibilities for group survival and sustainment? What would it look like if we were to build healing relationships with our bodies, establish healing interpersonal relationships with those around us, and lastly, build a healing relationship with the environment that surrounds us? I believe that switching our modes of survival from an independent one to a collective mode of survival can be a foundational precursor to liberation movements. I argue that relying on each other and developing skill sets like problem solving, processing trauma, and creating and imagining as a group are all practices that can be foundational knowledge for not us only to prepare for the precarious future that is to come, but also to more effectively rebel against the state. I think mobilizing becomes a lot more effective when we first give ourselves time to like look at each other in the face, to sit and really discern how to love and care for each other. And most importantly, when we've had time to discern what a utopia looks like for us, or what environment void of systemic harm looks like for us, and how we can embody some of those aspirations in our everyday life. I thoroughly believe that collective relearning, knowledge sharing, and collective imagining and creating creates a foundation for collective resilience. So on September 30th, we will select our cohort of 15 to 20 Black and Brown young adult creatives for a group residency experience where participants will engage in healing pedagogical art practices. This pool of young artists, writers, and theorists will be individuals interested in creating art as a group, participating in healing exercises such as meditations, group writing reflections, and building an intimate connection with their cohort. Residents will attend a series of art and writing workshops, open discussions, and body-centered exercises, primarily facilitated by myself and other amazing creatives like Rita Rutherford, Angel Edwards, Janina Diana, Graciela, amongst others. By the end of the residency experience, participants will be introduced to healing creative practices such as somatic pedagogy and Afrofuturist methods of speculation, design, and invention. Participants will use these practices and experiences as a form of research and knowledge creation to collectively envision a utopia, to then design and create inventions that support their envisioned utopia. We want to empower young adults with creative tools that support effective change and movements towards liberation. So here are the project goals and essentially what I hope to achieve from the project. As I mentioned before, introduce participants, teens and young adult creatives to healing creative practices. Specifically, we're focusing on somatic pedagogy and utopic imagining, which I'll explain like what those two things are in a bit. We want to have participants engage in collective interdependence by sharing knowledge and creating as a group. We want to encourage participants to collectively envision a utopia that serves them. And lastly, have participants create inventions that support their envisioned utopia. So through our scheduled programming, the intention is to establish this foundational knowledge on how to create, heal, and play together as a group. We'll go through this process of thinking of utopia, imagining and engaging in healing practices to assess our bodily relationships to capitalism, all for participants and facilitators to gain a skill set and collective resilience. The hope is then that participants will share their skills to their families and those around them, and that their practices become embodied or become almost a reflex in everything they do in the future. These practices will encourage folks to be more present in their body, be more present with those around them, and make choices that reflect the kind of world they wish to see around them. Okay. So here's a condensed general timeline of what the project will look like. We will essentially, like today's Wednesday, I want Wednesday to kind of be our day, and we will meet weekly throughout the weeks that we are active. And this series of programming will be primarily at the Paul Robeson House, the Futures Us Collective Studio, which is located in Fishtown. And I'm also in the process of confirming another super cool site. So that'll be probably, if confirmed, for February. So yeah, all the meetings are scheduled for Wednesday. We will meet weekly from October to November. And then for like workshops and open discussions. And then from December to January, we'll have like this really nice break where we can all just like chill and pretty much like reevaluate and like reflect on the workshops that we do throughout the first 2 months. But also I think December and January could be this cool space for if there's any participant that wants to host some type of workshop or program, they can. So just keep in mind that that window is also open for that. And then February, we'll jump right back in for Black Futures Month with workshops and open discussion once a week. And then April will be reserved, oh, sorry, I skipped March. Right, March will be reserved for the artists in residence to create independently and in groups in our studio. And then April will be reserved for preparing for our final conclusion of the project, which will be a show and a zine. And then May will be our final concluding show at the Paul Robeson House, where we will present all of the works, the culminating works, like findings and inventions that were created throughout the project. It will be presented there and also like in the zine that we culminate together too. So I wanted to give a little introduction to the 2 main focuses that we're interested in for the project, and also like kind of why they're relevant, why we're going through this like timeline. But first we want to introduce folks by like getting ourselves back in our bodies like physically. And we're going to be doing this through somatic therapy or somatic pedagogy. And so to give like more context, somatic healing is a body-centered form of therapy. It's based on like many ideas, but the main idea being that we don't just internalize trauma mentally, but we also do through our body, particularly in our nervous system, and also in our reflexes and our habits and how we respond to our environment. But somatic pedagogy specifically is considered a therapy for the oppressed. It offers resistance to our violent capitalist environment by encouraging people to assess their bodily relationship with capitalism and how it manifests socially in our interpersonal relationships. Through therapeutic group practices, somatic pedagogy encourages deeper relationships with one individual's body, as well as the collective body, to ultimately embody a healing state. So throughout October to November, once a week, we'll be engaging in different body-centered healing practices, like guided meditations, writing exercises. We have this cool dance workshop that I'm excited about too, and open discussions. And we'll be doing this to explore how our habits, routine, and reflexes are all influenced by capitalism. This exploration will allow us to, in later months, more clearly discern what practices we need to incorporate into our daily lives, so that our lives reflect the utopia we aspire to achieve in some tangible aspects. This obviously doesn't change or alter the tangible environment around us entirely, but it encourages us to begin interacting and engaging with ourselves and our comrades from non-capitalist influences, from utopian aspirations, from healing and mindful and grounding perspectives. Soma will also encourage us to be physically present with each other and encourage us to grow a level of trust and camaraderie amongst each other, which is so important, not only for this project, but for preparing for resistance, you know what I mean? And lastly, in these Soma exercises, we will explore how our bodies hold forms of knowledge in ways that our brain does not. And we will explore how, specifically ancestrally, we have internalized methods of self-soothing and care, and how we can consciously and effectively use those methods of self-soothing and care in groups. And so February to March is going to be all about utopic imagining, which I'm super excited about. Utopic imagining is a pedagogy developed by myself and Rita Rutherford. It is a practice where one imagines, designs, and creates altered realities that better serve Black and Brown communities. Utopic imagining is an Afrofuturist method of speculating the past, present, and future, imagining a utopia, and designing technologies that supports one's envisioned utopia. In this series of programming, where we'll meet once a week every Wednesday, we'll go beyond what is possible, tangible, and even go beyond what we have the brain capacity to understand, to collectively imagine environments that affirm all, as opposed to environments we live in today that oppress us. We'll go through a process of engaging in different imaginative practices, writing exercises, guided meditations, and open discussion. And then the cohort will be invited to work in groups or several small groups to design and create technologies that support our envisioned utopias. And when I'm thinking of like technologies and designing and inventing, I'm really thinking of like a more expansive understanding of what an invention is and what design can be. Thinking of technologies as an invention you can use, like anything that can be used as a tool or a resource that can really create affect in your life or affect you in a positive way. And so in the previous pilot project, when we did this at a smaller scale, folks did different things like invented a morning ritual for themselves or developed and crafted a new way to communicate effectively with friends. We were also looking at examples like food sharing systems. So like stuff like that is what we're thinking of when we're thinking of like inventing. And last but not least on the timeline is the Zine and Show Prep and Exhibition on view at the Paul Robeson House. So yeah, we'll conclude with an exhibition at the Paul Robeson House and the Zine. The concluding materials will present the writings, discussions, and artwork generated by participants, as I mentioned before. And I really hope that the presentation of this work, especially like this zine, will be this pedagogical tool for our audience in the future. A reference for how communities can collectively process trauma, share knowledge, and create together. The image you see right here is an example of like the thesis show that I did, but the sky's kind of the limit. Well, we got the capacity of the actual space, but it's really like whatever we want to do. Like, yeah. To conclude, the Future's Us Group Residency is a space to process trauma experience from systemic harm. It is an introduction to working together, to collective imagining and creation, and it is a space for folks to generate and share knowledge. The practices we'll engage in the upcoming weeks might seem playful, but that's because engaging in this process or this project is a pleasurable experience. We spoke about this a lot, like in the pilot iteration of this project last fall, but looking towards revolution, looking towards resistance against the state does not solely include pain and suffering. Because like, how could that even make sense? Capitalism is pain and suffering and exploitation and not an enjoyable, affirming experience. If we are to embody the world we want to see, a Black utopia, a brown utopia, a queer utopia, then we have to begin practicing what that utopia looks like today. We need to reflect that in our actions, in our relationships with ourselves, in our relationships with our loved ones. What does your utopia look like? Mine looks like relying and caring for the beautiful people around me for mutual support. Mine looks like healing from the hellscape that we live in now, that my ancestors have lived in for generations. And it looks like play, joy, and healing. If you're looking to build a connection with people, build a connection with your body and environment, then I deeply encourage you to apply to be a Features Arts Artist in Residence. We're looking for young, Black and Brown creators of any discipline. And the application process is super easy. I think I mainly just asked a question to see, like, just get an insight of like who you are and what your artistic perspective is, but like, it's no criteria. Like, you just apply and then you're in. So, lastly, I'll just say before I'm done talking, I recommend you check out somaticutopicimagine.com if you're interested in seeing some like work examples of some of the stuff folks have done in the pilot iteration of this project. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm available for any questions. Also, shout out to y'all broadcasting live. If y'all have any questions as well, feel free to, I think it might be helpful if y'all want to raise your hand because I'll see that on the thing. So, thank y'all. But yeah, any questions? Thank y'all so much for coming. Oh my God, no worries. I'm honestly so filled right now. I'll redo the presentation. But yeah, y'all. I also have postcards to pass out to like folks y'all see on the street.
You did a great job. I think you touched on everything I was anxious about.
Word.
Well done. Amazing.
Oh, perfect.
So when is the due date for the application?
There really isn't one. I would say like, oh, okay, I'll say hard deadline. I'm gonna look on the calendar. But we're sending out official announcements to like people on the 30th. So if
This month?
yes, September 30th, sorry. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if by Monday, September 26th, applications will be submitted. But yeah, yo, I don't know. I'm super hyped. Like I feel like it's gonna be really fun. Oh, I'll also say too, like if being in the actual cohort sounds like something that might be pretty much just like too much for your schedule or something like that, like we'll be having a lot of these workshops and stuff open to the public. So you can like jump in and stuff like that through that way. Yeah. But also if you can be in a cohort, I highly recommend because it'll be like I think that'll make the experience just like 10 times more fruitful for everyone.
So I really don't want to make you do the whole presentation again.
No,
But
it's
I
all
would
good.
love to hear like are there specifics in terms of like the intention behind the standing, like the goal of any.
Yeah, in general, I really just want to think of, well, in general, I guess, sorry, I'm like, I don't know why I'm getting scattered right now. Like I did just okay. Yeah, pretty much. But I think inspiration wise, I was in general just really interested in seeing how like creative practices can be involved and used like in these like transformative healing ways for Black and Brown people, but even also too as like this kind of like precursor for liberation movements where art and creating together can be this like knowledgeable space and this space of knowledge creation where we're like learning effectively how to like create and problem solve together. So while we won't be like solving all world problems with this project, I feel like when we get into these consistent practices of figuring things out together creatively, like then we can have that foundational knowledge for like other things in the future. So that's pretty much I want this project to be like this foundational knowledge for folks that we create and like share together. I don't know if that makes sense.
Would there be any readings or books for the therapy workshop?
That's a good question. I wanted it to be kind of like as anti-academic as possible, kind of. but I'm not at all opposed to that if folks want like recommended like readings. Cause I even also have like, um, like essays I stole off the internet that I can share too. So we could definitely always have it where literature is a feature, but not necessarily mandatory.
I'm excited to read it.
Y'all don't even know, yo. I had a real long day. Like, I really appreciate it.
How
Thank
many
y'all.
people are you looking for in the cohort?
The ideal would be 10 to 15. I think it realistically probably 8, but yeah, I want to spread the word to get it to 10 to 15. I'll be really lit. But I'm not really, it's no pressure. I think 15 would definitely be a cap, mainly just because our studio is not the biggest. So
Do you have applications already?
yeah, we got a few.
Wow.
Yeah.
Will the meetings be like in person or is there like an option for virtual?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, actually. Well, I'm gonna try and make as much of them hybrid as possible. I think the ones that probably won't be as accessible virtual is like whenever we're working in the studio, just because it's so like bodies centered and it's a lot of movement. Like I don't want to be on a GoPro or something crazy. But like yeah, any pretty much, especially the open discussion, they'll definitely be virtual. And those will pretty much always be here. I have the timeline pretty much where it's like workshop, 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 then concluding open discussion at the end of each month. So
Can you pull up the slide with the timeline again?
absolutely, yes. Oh, hey, what's up? Girl. Okay.
Thank you. Do you have like a age target for residency? Do you specify young?
Yeah,
That's bodily or spiritually.
I would say definitely spiritually. I think I like full transparency. I kind of advertise it that way just because I proposed it that way for the grant, but I really don't have restrictions. Like it's like, yeah.
How do you like see writers fitting into this particular cohort?
Could you repeat the question, sir?
Yeah, how do you see writers fitting into this particular cohort, especially thinking about like the exhibition at the end?
Oh my God, thank you for that question. So someone asked, how do I see or how do we see like writers engaging in this project? Honestly, I think writers and thinkers are like a really key component to this. Like I honestly, the practices, like the artistic practices that we're going to engage in don't like require technical skill. It's really like if you're interested in writing, like creative writing especially, then I think this is a really good space for you. We're going to be doing a lot of workshops that are writing centered, especially when we're going to be getting into utopic imagining. Like we're going to be like the imaginative practices kind of start with that like pre-writing and that like exploration of words and language. So it's going to be super important. And even for the dean too, I was just thinking about this like a couple weeks ago. I kind of am leaning towards it being this space where folks can just keep like can write something out and have it in the dean too. Outside of just like maybe the poems or the works that we create. Like if you want to write an essay and have it in the dean, that's an option too. But yeah, I think writing is like a really key component, especially like creative writing. Did you have a question?
No, I guess it really stuck in a lot of ways. Like how many or what are you imagining as the mix of like discipline, media that are being brought in by individuals, but also like that are sort of interplaying?
Yeah, I'm gonna go onto the website that shows the pilot project. I think that'll give some. Scrolling. Oh, someone's popping up. So, in terms of them coming together, we're really using all of these practices as like these methods of learning and like knowledge generating. So that's kind of like what the function of them will be, if that makes sense. And really what the artworks are going to serve as is kind of like documents of that, like note taking, like if that makes sense. But some examples are like we did a poetry session, or what really happened was a lot of people ended up leaning towards poetry when we were doing this creative writing exercise. So that'll be one thing. Another thing facilitators did for the pilot project was drafted guided meditations. And this is also like when we're thinking about inventions, like this to me constitutes what an invention is. Like and so it's like the writing itself is a work, but also the act of doing the meditation is a work itself too. So it's like the experience and then also like the documentation of that experience that we're like really going to be merging together and kind of like marrying. Oh yeah, forgot too. Collaging is a huge component of it too. Again, this is another thing that would be something that we do essentially in February when we're focused on utopic imagining. I believe there's some examples. Sorry, I'm short. We also, some folks did some curated playlists, which is fun. We can absolutely do that again. We had some virtual listening parties for these too. I think that would be super dope. But this is also when I'm talking about like emergent programming that can happen between December and January. This is like stuff that I'm talking about. But it can also be like if you have a legit idea and you're like, I want to present something and I need to get on the soapbox moment, like please do that too. And when it comes to somatic art making specifically, if you see this background right here, and then also in the picture, like these are examples of like the works and how I guess the art functions, where it's like the artwork itself is the documentation, but the real artwork also too is us working and moving through with the mark making. Like, I don't know if you see like this pose that I'm in right now, but it was because we were like really flowing and moving through with our body, which is another practice too that we're going to engage in a lot, is like movement in general, especially in a group, which should be fun. It kind of, I personally, I'm like a little, it's like, it sounds intimidating, but it's only because it's like this level of like trust you have to build. But it should be fun. We're not doing that crazy. And then I think lastly, thinking of like documented works too. I think the open discussions and conversations that we have, I definitely don't want to record all of them. And if there is discussions that we have with the cohort, is like, we don't want this recorded, like we definitely don't have to. But some of them, I think like presentation wise will be super fruitful for references in the future. And so that'll be another thing. Yeah. Go back to the slide. I didn't want to, I think we're at a good time. I'll just say again, I'm like super grateful for y'all coming out today. So thank y'all so much again. But yeah, if there isn't any further questions, we can kind of let it all, I guess, conclude here. But we'll be officially starting things the first week of October. So to stay in tune for that. And if you apply, you'll definitely get an email like first thing, like, here's the timeline, et cetera, so.